Hey everybody, I'm reviewing a movie that just dropped on Amazon Prime, and unless something really changes, this will definitely be in my top 10 for the year. This is the movie called The Vast of Night. Now, first of all, The Vast of Night is a movie that is just about programmed to be something I would love. It's got elements of classic sci-fi, it's got elements of some of the best filmmakers of the last 40 years, and it's just done so incredibly well. I was just thinking before I review this, I was thinking right now it almost reminds me that we're in a time very similar to the early 70s, where you had all these auteur filmmakers like all hitting their stride or all starting out at about the same time. You know, you had Spielberg and Scorsese, and you had De Palma, you had Coppola, you had all these guys all coming up right at the same time. But in that case, a lot of them came out of a similar system too. And here, right now, you've got Ari Aster, and he's made a big splash with only 2 movies under his belt. Similarly, Eggers has done something the same. You've got Peele coming out. And now I would like to add to that list, first-time director, and if you go to his IMDb, there is really nothing there. And that is Andrew Patterson. I know really much of nothing about him, but he makes a very, very self-assured and notable debut with this movie in my book. All right, so The Vast of Night. First of all, it starts out with a framing device. Now, I should have gone back and looked, but I don't think it gives an exact date. This has to be late 50s, right about 1960, 57 to 60, I would say. I'm not a car expert, but just by the look, it looks like that. The framing device of this is you are watching basically an episode of The Twilight Zone. Now, he doesn't call it The Twilight Zone, but he starts out with a slow push in to a very impeccable period living room like you would see in the late 50s, and it's going towards the TV. It's got the black and white on there, and it's showing what do they call it, Paradox Theater, and it has the opening, which is note for note and even graphically looks like a Twilight Zone. In fact, as I was watching it, I was like, was this because the Twilight Zone openings changed from year to year a little bit? I thought, is this an opening to the Twilight Zone that I don't remember? And then I noticed the voice was just a little bit different, and then it said, you know, Paradox Theater. I'm like, okay. And it says The Vast of Night. That's the episode. And then slowly you go into the screen, and then it fades into color, and the action starts. Now that alone should kind of give you a feel for this. The difference is you would expect in a movie like this a whole bunch of 50s music in the background or 60s music in the background, all those kind of tropes to set the scene for you. But instead, the music isn't. It's more ambient, it's more subtle, and it's a modern score. Sure, there's a little bit of period music, but it's way in the background. Anyway, you go in and you quickly meet your main characters. Faye, who's played by Sierra McCormick. I did recently see her in VFW, although she didn't make a real big impact on me there, but here she does in a fantastic job. And then you get the other main character is Everett, played by Jake Horowitz. And what happens is you basically immediately are following Everett as he's going into a school gymnasium and going through it, and you're basically kind of just getting a quick overview of the town and the people. He's obviously in high school. You find out really quickly that he is a radio DJ on the local little teeny radio station. He's like a fast talker. He kind of knows everybody. He's always kind of checking people off. But he's likable. He's brash, but he's likable. Really out of the gate. He doesn't seem like a bad kid. And pretty quickly he meets up with Faye. And Faye has just bought a new tape recorder, and she's excited to try it out. So she kind of tags along, and all this is shot in a long or a virtual long shot. I'm sure some cuts in there of him going through the school, wheedling around, meeting people. All these little interwoven stories are kind of happening. Really, really great way to set the scene and to kind of show us that world and to show us this period late 50s period on like a I don't know, Friday night or Saturday night, the game night. Everyone's getting ready for the basketball game. Parents are there, kids are there. There's a lot of bustle and hustle. And then she tags along, and as they walk along, they start talking. And this is where you really get the feel for what this movie is. I'm going to throw out some big names, but I think it's up to the task. So this isn't a big budget movie, but it has obvious influence of things like American Graffiti or Dazed and Confused. A day or a night in a youth of a period and a time. But unlike those movies, which are all about the social groups kind of interacting, and a little bit of comedy and a little bit of coming of age kind of stuff going on in both those movies, Dazed and Confused and American Graffiti, this movie is much more interested in nerdier, geekier things. This is a sci-fi movie at heart, a character-driven sci-fi movie. It's really, really cool in that way. So then there's the other big influences, which are going to be things like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And even in the way he shoots some of these long, swooping point of view shots, have a Evil Dead kind of comparison. If you remember in Evil Dead, the original Evil Dead, Sam Raimi got the effect by having this huge long board and nailing the camera to the board, and the people got on the end of each end of the board, because he was a low-budget filmmaker, really low-budget filmmaker, and running along the ground to get this kind of smooth gliding, almost Steadicam effect. And there's a couple shots in here that almost have that feel. So they're in the town of Cayuga, New Mexico, and I believe Cayuga is a fake name because Cayuga was the name of the production company that Rod Serling used when he made The Twilight Zone. So that's an obvious nod. There's another really big obvious nod in here too, I think, if you're looking for it, because this is the other giant influence here, and that is War of the Worlds, specifically the Orson Welles radio broadcast that caused hysteria of War of the Worlds. And Everett works at this little radio station called WOTW, and I am 1,000% sure WOTW is a nod to War of the Worlds. It has to be. So anyway, I love these old sci-fi B movies. They have monsters and everything. This one is much more character-driven and less monstery than those, but the same kind of awesome aesthetic is there. And then what happens is throughout this, I'm sorry, I'm kind of all over the place. I'm excited about this movie. I watched it last night. I probably should have more coherent thoughts, but I'm just going with it. So as you follow these two, they follow through the gymnasium, all this stuff happens, and you really get this banter back and forth between them that's crackling and makes you want to go back and listen to it again, which I do, because there's a lot of little character details and story details that are being spit out between them, and you're not catching it all because there's so much, and there's people around them going by saying things too. But eventually, as they go through, they walk out of the parking lot, and they're walking alone down these streets. And basically, she's going to her job, which is a switchboard operator, the type where they plug it in. Someone calls her, she's the operator, she plugs it in, it goes to that person. They know the houses. It's only basically people in that little town of Cayuga. She's going to her work, and he's going off to the radio station, and they split. And then the movie kind of takes off, and a mysterious thing starts happening. And it's audio-based. The radio aspect of all this is a big, huge element. The sound is a huge element. And you essentially have this really nerdy story of sci-fi and a plucky couple trying to, not really a couple, but friends. They may be a couple, we're not sure. Doesn't seem like they are yet. But they both have dreams, and they both are trying to discover what is this mystery, and they're kind of trying to let people know it's not all a secret. They're trying to put it out over the radio, and other people are calling them back and telling them what they think it is. There's all these kind of interesting elements. There's a whole storytelling element of it. There's at least 2 characters that enter into this movie and tell relatively extended stories, which a lot of people might find this dull because there's so much talking, but it's storytelling. It's all about storytelling. And the kind of storytelling, you could almost make this movie as a radio play, but he has such a sure hand and interesting editing style for this low budget movie that you are drawn with the flow. There's one, once again, this isn't a spoiler to the plot, there's one amazing sequence where the camera travels from her switchboard operating location through the town all the way to his radio station, and it's just technically dazzling. It obviously is saying, "Hey, look at me! I can do this," which is he earns it in this movie. But it also is this great way of just showing you small town America, and it isn't that much different from small town America you can find now. I guess I just can't rave enough about this movie. If you want action-packed storytelling, this is not for you. If you don't like characters who talk a fair amount, this is probably not for you. But if you have even the smallest bit of enjoyment of character-driven, mysterious, heady sci-fi, then this movie is a true gem. 5 star. I'm actually almost going out on a limb with this because my rating system is 1 to 5 stars or classic. To me, this is right on the level of classic. I've given that to a couple movies in the last few years. I can imagine going back to this movie. I can imagine wanting to just be in that world. The world itself is like a interesting nostalgic hug in a way. But, and this is my last thing, I'm all over the place, I'm sorry guys. Last thing is that as this movie ends, and I think it ends on a really solid note, which is important for a movie like this, if you think back upon it, there are some possible really scary and chilling implications if you believe what certain characters are saying. And that aspect is almost the sneaky after effect this movie could have if you really like it. Once again, I hope some people go out there and discover this and really, really love it as much as I did. And I probably oversold it. Some people are going to probably not like it at all and find it dull as you know what. But I think that most hardcore movie lovers, especially lovers of sci-fi, classic sci-fi, are going to find something that they're going to really enjoy with The Vast of Night. Talk to you soon.